Hello everyone, I'm Priyadarshini Mara, faculty at the Department of Buddhist Studies, University of Delhi. Today we'll be talking about module number 8, which is Brahmavir. This module belongs to Philosophy of Buddhism 1, paper number 11. What is Brahmavir? The Buddha taught his disciples to practice and develop 4 states of mind, which are termed as Brahmavir or the 4 divine states of dwelling. It refers to the mind states which are sublime or are abode of divine existence. So when we talk about this particular word Brahmavir, we are here referring to the divine states of existence. Abode of divine existence is something that has to be sought and stayed at naught for an instance or for a short period. So when we look at this divine abode of existence, we are here trying to state that it is not something which is temporary. When you talk about divine abode of existence or the Brahmavir, it is something which is permanent. You cannot come back from the level of this divine abode. It has to be the place of existence for the entire life. Mind should become one with them and as inseparable, and there should be no returning from these states. So when we look at the Brahmavir, we are here pointing out to the mind and Brahmavir as an entity which is not separate but as one. So there is no coming back to the normal life or to the life which is not virtuous. So when we talk about Brahmavir, it is the divine abode of existence which gives mind a transcendental existence. There are 4 dwelling stages. So these 4 states of divine dwelling are also called 4 immeasurables or the 4 perfections of virtue. We term it as 4 immeasurable or 4 perfection of virtue because here all our virtues are getting perfected. The contemplation of these states thus implies happiness and its causes on all sentient beings, freedom from suffering and all its causes on all sentient beings. Then, a blissful existence of all sentient beings without suffering and freedom from biasness, anger and attachment, and the development of equanimity by all sentient beings. So when we look at these 4 divine stages of dwelling or the 4 immeasurables, Brahmavir, we see that the contemplation of these states implies happiness and its causes on all sentient beings. So all the happiness and all that causes happiness is endowed on the sentient beings. Then freedom from suffering and all its causes on sentient beings. Then comes a blissful existence of all sentient beings without suffering and freedom from biasness, anger and attachment. And then comes the development of equanimity by all sentient beings. Now these sublime states are so called as they point out to right living by performance of right action and development of right attitude. So here when we look at the development has to be not only of your actions but also of your attitude. Development of right conduct or right attitude points out to an ethical way of life where the social and ethical conflicts can be removed by the advancement in these states. So what are these states exactly doing? They are removing all the non-virtuous activities and pointing out to an ethical way of life where the social and ethical conflicts which arise in our lives all the moment, they can be removed by advancement in these four states of dwelling. The suffering which lies at the root of existence can be healed with the awakening of nobility and promotion of kindness and sympathy towards all beings. So, as we've talked earlier also in other modules, we see that the basic principle of Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths. So, when we look at the philosophical aspect of Buddhism, we see that the Four Noble Truths lie at the base of the whole philosophical paradigm of Buddhism. So, the Four Noble Truths state that there is suffering, there is cause of suffering, this cause of suffering can be removed, and there's a path which leads to this cessation of suffering. So now, when we look at this Brahmavir, we say that the suffering which lies at the root of existence. So when we're talking about this suffering, it is inevitably associated with existence. This can be healed with the awakening of nobility and promotion of kindness and sympathy towards all the beings. So here, these four Brahmaviharas take us to the highest state which is not endowed with suffering. This will construct harmony and peace within ever conflicting society. So when we practice Brahmavihara or the four perfections, we will be advocating and incorporating harmony and peace within ever conflicting society. Brahmaviharas cannot be developed with a negative state of mind or with any feeling of greed or hatred. So, the negative state of mind, all the negative attitudes or thoughts like greed or hatred have to be removed in order to practice Brahmavihara. It is a state of righteousness with removal of hatred and all other defilements. So when we talk about Brahmavihara, we term it to be a state which is not endowed with any sort of defilement or any sort of evil actions or thought processes. So the mind which is afflicted with impurities of attachment, aversion, and ignorance cannot develop the sublime states of existence. That mind which is endowed or which is subject to the defilements of anger, attachment, and hatred cannot be subject or cannot practice Brahmavihara or the four perfections. Now let us see what are these four sublime states of existence. So when we talk about these four states or Brahmavihara, what are these four states? So here we gave an introduction as to why is it called Brahmavihara or four perfections. Now what are these four perfections? The four sublime states of existence are, the first one is Metta, which means loving kindness. The second one is Karuna, which means compassion. The third Brahmavihara is Mudita, which means sympathetic joy. And the fourth Brahmavihara or the fourth perfection is Upekha, or which is called equanimity. So Metta removes the powerful destructive vice of anger from beings and develops loving kindness. So the powerful destructive vice of anger from every being is removed by the practice of loving kindness. Karuna or compassion removes cruelty which is commonly present in the world. Each one of us is cruel, intentionally or unintentionally sometimes, but this cruelty prevails amongst us. And Sukaruna or compassion removes this cruelty from the world. Then comes Mudita or sympathetic joy, which eliminates jealousy and extends appreciative joy towards all beings. So when we look at sympathetic joy, it is not just the joy in one's own happiness or one's own success. It is the joy which extends towards all beings. Then comes upekha or equanimity. This helps in developing an equanimous attitude by removing desire for the pleasurable and aversion to the non-pleasurable. So, the desire for the pleasurable and aversion to the non-pleasurable is the attitude which equanimity or upekha helps in developing. Now, what we'll do is we'll study each of these 4 divine states in details. Let us begin with the first state. The first state is metta or loving kindness. What is loving kindness? Loving kindness is the first sublime state. Love, which points out to the desireless state for any possession and a profound understanding that when we look from the ultimate level, there exists no possessor or no possession. This is what is called highest form of love. So the basic understanding which is attained once you have moved beyond the empirical realm of existence. Now this basic understanding which one gains with the attainment of pragya or knowledge is that there is no possessor and no possession. Once you have realized this basic understanding or this higher truth, it's basic in the sense that it is the most fundamental understanding once you've attained the higher truth. But when we talk about the higher truth, it is actually the transcendental knowledge for which the empirical knowledge is equally required. Until and unless you don't cross that level of empirical existence, you do not know what is there at the empirical level or how is it different from the transcendental level. So, reaching that higher state of transcendental level or attainment of pragya or knowledge, one understands that there is no possession or no possessor. Nothing is permanent. So if I call a particular thing to be mine, for how long is it going to be mine? For a very short period, because everything is changing every moment or every fraction of a second. So you cannot say that you possess a particular thing because who am I? I am also changing every moment. Therefore, this understanding of no possessor and no possession leads one to what is called highest form of love. It is the realization that there exists no self or I. When we point out to the notion of a self, it is mere delusion that we are bringing forth. So when we talk about I, me, mine or a particular self, it is a mere delusion because in reality or when we look at the truth of this I, me and mine, we see that it is nothing but a changing identity which is changing every fraction of a moment. Metta is therefore that love and benevolence that we extend to all living beings regardless of their status, class, category or level. So when we look at metta, we say that it is love and benevolence that we extend to all living beings regardless of their class, status, category or level. So this love does not look at which class you belong to or what society you're coming from or what is your level. all it looks for is just love and imparting love to every being regardless of any limitations. Discrimination and selfish attachment are missing when we talk of loving kindness. It is like love of a mother which always seeks for the welfare of her child, impersonal affection towards all living beings, loving every being whether he or she is acquainted with you or not, making no distinction between people. So here we are trying to relate this loving kindness or metta to love of that mother which is not bounded by any circumstances or any likings. So it is equal amongst all her children, be it one or be it many. So this love that we're talking about is unbounded. Practicing loving kindness without any selfish motive and with equanimity removes all defilements and makes a person virtuous. Metta is like the rays of sun which fall equally on every creature. So when we look at this rays of sun, we see that it is not limited to any particular class or society or people, but it falls equally on all people, be it good people or the so-called bad people. See, this distinction between good and bad is very subjective. So we cannot debate here over what is good or what is bad. But the moral and the immoral actions that we do make us good or the bad. And so, without any discrimination between whom it is falling on, the rays of the sun falls on everyone. And the same way, we have to develop this loving kindness so that we impart it towards all beings without any discriminatory attitude. It does not differentiate between people, be it man or a woman, virtuous or vicious, rich or poor, animals or human beings, and so on. No matter if a person likes you or hates you, if you have developed loving kindness, then you will bestow love upon all, like the clouds showering rain upon all beings. So when it is metta, it has to be developed in such a way that it is showered on everyone like the raindrops which falls on everyone unless you have an umbrella. Metta can curb hatred as well. If you constantly show love and kindness to a person who dislikes you, then there will be a time when that same person will realize his mistake and bend down. So for how long can you take hatred, or for how long can you just go on hating someone? If the other person, on the other hand, is all good to you, is not doing any harm to you in any way, then for how long can you keep hating that person? There will be a time when you will give upon your hatred for that person. So, metta also tests your patience. You have to go on loving every being without any sort of thing that you want in return. And this is what is loving kindness in true sense. Hatred is not removed by greater intensity of hatred. Rather, it is eliminated by greater intensity of love. This loving kindness points out to all virtuous actions, thoughts, and speech. When we talk about virtuous or vicious deeds, then it's not just actions. It also points out to your thought process and to your speech. He who has metta spreads love even at the hardest time of violence and evil. He will never lose his temperament, no matter how hard it gets. He will try to spread love and harmony in the society around. If this love is not developed or is lost, then you look at others as your enemies and try to harm them in every possible way. According to Buddhism, he who practices loving kindness sleeps happily, gets up with the same happiness, is not disturbed by any nightmares or bad dreams. He keeps happy, and so the mirror reflects, looks at him. It makes a person beautiful. His love, which is pure and unbiased, attracts even the animals towards him. His mind becomes highly focused and is born again in a blissful state. And it can be aroused by positive thoughts and actions of both mind and body. The egoistic feelings of me and mine have to be eliminated, and this is how he becomes a part of humanity. So this is what we've studied or learnt about metta or loving kindness. Now coming to the next Brahmavir, the second Brahmavir, it is karuna or compassion. Karuna is extending of sympathy to all sentient beings. Now when we talk about extending of sympathy to all sentient beings, here we don't really state that sympathy when someone is upset, to sympathize with them when someone is depressed, but sympathy in the sense that we don't have to be a part of their suffering, but we need to bring them out from that suffering. And by sympathy or compassion here, we're pointing out to that ability where we are able to bring out another person from that suffering or misery of his or her. This sympathy is not to be equated with pity. So sympathy and pity here are two different things. It is the realization of essencelessness of all existence. That there is no thing that exists all by itself. All the phenomenal existence is dependent on certain factors or on each other. There is no individual entity. This notion is prevalent in Mayan Buddhism, where this particular realization is given out by combining pragya with karuna. Pragya here stands for knowledge and karuna stands for compassion. The Tibetan Mahayanists believe Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvar to be the embodiment of compassion. Avalokiteshvar, the Tibetan Bodhisattva, is believed to be the embodiment of compassion. In one of the previous birth story of Buddha, which is compiled in the text called Jatak, it is said that the Bodhisattva offered himself to feed the hungry tigress that was going to eat her cubs. This portrays the highest form of compassion, where a compassionate person lives not for himself, but for the betterment of people around him. So here, when we look at karuna or compassion, it is not for the betterment of one's own self. There's no selfish attitude that is adjoined with it. It is rather for the betterment of people around him. This is the whole basic idea of Buddhism, to develop that sort of an understanding or attitude amongst people where they stop living for themselves. They stop being selfish and look around themselves and start living for the betterment of people around them. Now, karuna brings out the altruistic nature of a being who has developed the highest form of karuna, which is to seek happiness in the elevation of suffering of others, and which is to have a compassionate heart towards those in pain and suffering. So when we talk about compassion, we are for sure not equating it with pity, because it is something which is more transcendental or which has gone beyond the normal human living. So when we talk about compassion, we are trying not to be a part of somebody's suffering. Rather, we want that suffering to end so that the person himself can get out of that miserable state of existence. And this is what is compassion, or the state of dwelling, or the perfect state of dwelling, which is required to be developed by every individual. Now, coming to the third Brahmavir, or the third perfect nature of existence, it is Mudita, or sympathetic joy. Mudita refers to not just extending sympathy, but taking sympathetic joy or altruistic joy in the happiness of others. So when we look at Mudita, we see that it is not just extending sympathy, but taking sympathetic joy or altruistic joy in the happiness of others. See, when we look at the individual, or when we look at the phenomenal existence, so human beings who constitute this phenomenal existence have this peculiar behavior, which is, it is easy for us to bring out somebody from misery, or to be a part of somebody's suffering and to feel the same sort of pain, but it is very difficult for us to be happy in other people's happiness. That's more difficult. So when we look at our own nature, if there's somebody who is in pain, it is easy for us to go and relieve that pain, or to be a part of that person's suffering basically. But if something is good happening with another person, then it becomes a little more difficult for us to bear that, to bear the happiness of another person. Anyway, so coming back to Mudita, we see that it is an antidote to jealousy and selfishness. It is a state where the joy is extended not just to the success of others, but also towards one's own self, so that all feelings of hatred and envy can be diminished. Extending this joy to the thousands around us in despair leads to the evolution of a new being onto the path to liberation. We can bring back a ray of light in the dark and gloomy lives of such people. By rejoicing in the happiness of others, one can become happy and share the results of their positive actions as well. Such a person will always find happiness in the success and achievements of other people, and will never try to be a hindrance, or will never try to stop another person's progress. So when we look at this, it is the development that we need to be happy, not just for ourselves, but even for the joy or for the happiness of other people around us, for the progress of people around us. And that, in true sense, is the development of the higher state of existence. Now coming to the last perfection, which is Upekha, or equanimity. What is Upekha? Equanimity is the fourth state of divine existence. It is the balancing of mind and thus the actions. It refers to a stability of mind which is rooted in knowledge of higher existence, and it gives an impartial view or a just attitude towards perceiving existence. So this Upekha is not rooted in either aversion or attachment, or in favoring one and disapproving the other. So when we look at equanimity, equanimity in general terms points out to equal attitude. So here we are trying to state that it is not rooted in either aversion or attachment, or in favoring one and disapproving the other. So there is no extreme of the two opposites. It's more of a balanced, a middle attitude, a neutral attitude towards all the things around us. However, this balanced mind or the vision without any biasness is very difficult to attain, and so developing of the sublime state of equanimity requires predominant efforts from an individual. When we look into our existence or the empirical existence, we notice fluctuating situation occurring every moment. These changing situations give rise to various mental and physical attitudes. Sometimes we are happy, sometimes sad. Sometimes we are satisfied, and the very next moment we might be dissatisfied. So, when we look at this human behavior of the phenomenal existence, then it's comprised of fluctuating feelings, ideas, emotions, which sometimes we try to hide, but most of the times they come out in various forms. As the phenomenal existence is in constant flux and things do not remain same the very next moment, similar is the case with all our attitudes. There is a constant rise and fall in our lives. Looking into life, we notice how it continually moves between contrasts, rise and fall, success and failure, loss and gain, honor and blame. So there are these contrasting, fluctuating ideas or emotions that keep arising. We feel how our heart responds to all this with happiness and sorrow, delight and despair, disappointment and satisfaction, hope and fear. So these waves of emotion carry us up and down, fling us down, and no sooner do we find rest than we are in the power of a new wave again. How can we expect to get a footing on the crest of waves? How can we erect the building of our lives in the midst of this ever restless ocean of existence, if not on the island of equanimity? Let me repeat this again for you. How can we erect the building of our lives in the midst of this ever restless ocean of existence, if not on the island of equanimity? So therefore, this equanimity brings a control, a balanced state to all our erupting emotions and feelings. No matter how depressed or how happy we are, equanimity brings a control over all these fluctuating, constantly moving emotional stages, which compel us to do certain things which we are not supposed to do. A world where that little share of happiness allotted to beings is mostly secured after many disappointments, failures, and defeats. A world where only the courage to start anew again and again promises success. And this is what is equanimity. And development of equanimity leads us to a profound world of harmony and peace without any conflicting ideas or notions that arise within human beings. Now, let us see how these four stages are interrelated. Now, when we look at all these four divine stages of dwelling, we see that all of them are equally important. There is no particular state which has to be more important than the other, or which has to be developed more than the other. The interrelation of these four sublime states is quite predominant and apparent. How then do these four sublime states pervade and suffice each other? So we're going to talk about how these four states pervade and suffice each other. Unbounded love guards compassion against turning into partiality, prevents it from making discriminations by selecting and excluding, and thus protects it from falling into partiality or aversion against the excluded side. Love imparts to equanimity its selflessness, its boundless nature, and even its fervor. For fervor, too, transformed and controlled, is part of perfect equanimity, strengthening its power of keen penetration and wise restraint. Compassion prevents love and sympathetic joy from forgetting that while both are enjoying or giving temporary and limited happiness, there still exists at that time most dreadful state of suffering in the world. It reminds them that their happiness coexists with measureless misery, perhaps at the next doorstep. So that constant idea or the constant awareness that your happiness is not bigger than what is happening around you, then the misery that are occurring around you leads you to portray or to have love and sympathetic joy. So these four states are interrelated. When there is loving kindness, there has to be compassion. A compassionate attitude gives rise to all love and kindness, and that very compassionate attitude, along with loving and kindness, brings out sympathetic joy and equanimity. This equanimity is the head of all Brahmavir, of all the states of perfect joy. And it gives an idea that this compassionate behavior, loving kindness, and sympathetic joy has to be imparted towards all beings, regardless of where they are from or who they are, equally with all, without any biasness or discrimination. So, this is the whole idea or the study